Hello Python programmers, welcome back to our channel. In this video, I'm going to explain built-in methods in Python. So we're going to start with some of the built-in methods provided for us by Python. All right, let's say we have a variable called name, okay, and then we say equal to John, okay. Now the first method I want you to know is the print method. So the print is a built-in method in Python, allows us to print our value to the console or to the terminal. When you have the print method, you can print your value. So in this case, we have a variable called name and we have the value called John. So we can print John to the console by calling the variable name. So when we do something like this and we run, so you can see that we have John printed out for us. Another one you should know is the built-in method is the dot upper. I can create a variable or I can do it in the same. I can create a variable like this. Let me do it so that you get on the understanding of what I'm saying. So I can say x equals to name, then I can say dot upper, okay, then I'll call. So anytime you are dealing with a method, always remember your parentheses, always remember this parenthesis. So you are calling a method. So now that I have a variable that is holding this, I can now do x, and when I print, I should have, okay, so you can see now that we now have all John all in capital letter. So when you call the dot uppercase, you can have everything in capital letter. The next thing you should know is the dot capitalize, okay. So let's say we have a value, let's make John small letter, for example, and then we say we call x again. Python allows us to reuse variables, so we say name, and then we call the dot capitalize, okay. Remember your parentheses. Then when we print again, and then you can see that John, the first letter here, is now in capital letter compared to what we have here. So that is how the capitalize method works. The another method is the title method. The title method. So if we do x like this and we say equal to and we say name and then we call the dot title, call our parentheses and we print x again, we will still have the same thing. So the title, let me add another word to this and let's call it John. Let's call it John Mekus. I don't know who is John Mekus. So when we run it again, okay, so you can see that the first letters are all in capital letter. So that is what the title does. The words start with uppercase character and all remaining characters have lower cases. They capitalize, and let's see their difference. So this is it about uppercase dot title dot capitalize dot upper. The next one I want to know is the length method. So the length method is a built-in method that tells us the length of item we have in a list. So let's say we have a variable called ls and we say equal to, and then we have a square bracket and we have values that are inside. Let's say 1, 2, 4, and 5. We want to know how many values we have here. What do we do? So we call the method, we can call ls, and then we call the dot length method on it. How do I do it? Okay, let's have a variable. So I'll say variable then equal to, then I'll have a length method, and then inside here I'll now pass in our variable which is lst. Okay, so the length method takes a parameter, and the parameter is the variable we want to check the length. You can see that it's telling us it's 5 items that we have here. Okay, 1 to 5. So the length does not use an index. It tells you everything you have in that list. We can also use the type method. So we can also come and check the type of data we are dealing with. So we can do x equal to length type here, and then we pass in our variable, our list variable. So when we print x, we can now get the type of data. So you can see that it's telling us that it is class list. So remember that everything in Python is a class, all about object. The next one is a string. Okay, we can convert an integer to a string using the string method. How do we do that? So we can have a variable like, remember why I'm still using x is because Python allows to reuse variables. So we can have x equals to 34. Already this is an integer. So if I want to convert it to a string, what do I do? Okay, let me say a, and then I'll say equal to. So I'll call the string method, and then I'll pass in my variable that is holding my integer value. When I print a now, all right, so you can see that we are having 34 here. If we decide to print their type, print type here, and let's see. So we say type, and then square parenthesis, and then we pass in the variable. Okay, now let's print the both of them and let's see what we get. So you can see that the first one here, which is this, is a class of integer, and the second one here is a class of a string. So this is how it works. So you can convert an integer data type to a string data type when you use the string built-in method. The next thing is we can remove white spaces from our text. So how do we do that? So if we have something like this, let's call it message, for example, message, and then we say equal to London is beautiful. So we say London is beautiful. Okay, London is beautiful. So if we say London is beautiful, and then there are white spaces here, there's white spaces here. Now if we want to strip these white spaces, we need to call the dot strip method on these white spaces. So how do we do it? So we can now call, let's have another variable. So I'll call this variable, okay, let me just say L equal to, then message. I'll call the message, our message variable, and then I'll do dot strip. I'll call the dot strip method. So the dot strip method does not take a parameter. Let's print L. So you can see that London is beautiful. Okay, let's print the message itself and let's see what we have. So if we say print, so let's print the message and let's see their difference. Okay, so we have message and we have the look at their difference. So there are white spaces here and there are also white spaces here. But because we added strip, okay, and our variable here, okay, our L variable here, you can see that the white spaces has been removed. So this is how the dot strip method works in Python. So the dot strip method remove white spaces. So the next one we're going to look at is the dot split method. So how does the split method works? So let's have S. So I'll have a variable called S. Forgive me, just pardon me. Just understand that each of these variables are just for example sake. They are not real. All right, so we can have X and then we say equal to Silicon Valley is beautiful. Okay, let's say Silicon Valley. Okay, Silicon Valley. I will now call the dot split method on it. So if I call the dot split method and I pass in like this, and then let's print when we run our code like this. So you can see that each of the word has now become what? A list. Okay. So silicon is beautiful. Okay. So like this, you can see that each word has now become an item, an element in a list. Okay, so this is how the dot split method works. So the next one we are going to talk about is the dot join method. Now the dot join method deals with a string, and since we have already converted this to a string, okay, we already have a list name here which is saying silicon is value, which are already in a list. Now let's call the dot join method on it. So how do we do that? So we can do j equal to, we have a double quote, and then let's give it a space, then we call the dot join method. So when we call the dot join and then parenthesis, now this parenthesis will take a parameter. So the dot join method takes a parameter, in this case our variable. So we pass in our s, which is holding the list of our the list. So when we now print j, so let's print j, what we have here. So we can change a list back to a text, okay, to a sentence. Okay, so this is how it works. And let's talk about the dot replace method. Dot replace method. So if we say, let's call our variable message equal to I am learning Python. I can now call the dot replace on this variable. So how do I do that? So let's have a variable. So I'll call this variable R, and then I'll now call the message, and then I'll now call the dot replace on it. So if I call the dot replace and then our parenthesis, so inside the parenthesis, the first thing I'm going to indicate is the word I want to change. So in this case, I want to change learning to mastery. So I'll do learning to mastery. So I'll call the next word I want to exchange it with is mastery. So how do I do it? So I do something like this. So like this. Okay, so when we now print R now, so let's print R now. So you can see that mastery, what we are doing here. So here we are changing. So the dot replace method replaces a word with a new word. The first parameter you pass in the word that you want to change. The second parameter you pass in the word you are changing the first word to. Alright, so that is it about the dot replace method. If you want to learn more about the list method, I have a video where I explain every single thing you should know about list method. You can check the video description. So the same thing applies to dictionary, the same thing applies to a set, same thing applies to tuple. But the one I've not discussed now is the file handling method. Let's quickly look at that. So how do we handle file? For us to handle file, there are methods that Python give us to handle files. Okay, so how do we do that? Reading from and writing to a file is a common task in Python programming. Let's look at some of the methods like open, read, write, and let's see how it works. So what do? When we want to open a file, we come with a variable name. So let's call it file, and then we say equal to. When you have a variable, you now call it file. So then you can now write, you can now open keyword. So this open keyword allow us to now pass the name of the file we want to write. Okay, so we'll now say names. Okay, let's call it names. Say dot, call it names, pass them into double quote. So we call it names, and then we call it .txt. Okay, remember that every file you are going to create are going to be a .txt file. Then we now use the w keyword. The w keyword is telling that it should write. So you can see some of the method. Whenever I'm going to explain everything about file, I will explain all of this. But for now, just hold on to this. Okay, so the first thing is to have a variable. Then you use the open keyword to open a file. So here, this is a file we want to open with the name and the file extension, which is .txt. and then we use the W keyword. The W keyword is a capital letter telling that we want to write. The next thing, let's now write. So if we want to write to a file, how do we do that? This is how to open a file. So if we want to write to a file, how do we do that? Can now do something like this. Remember, we now have a variable, so we call the variable of the file we have created called the .write method. So the .write method. So when we call the .write method, have a parenthesis. So the parenthesis, the .write method takes parameter, and the parameter is what we want to write inside our file. So in this case, we'll now say hello, all right, hello Gem. When we now do this, we need to close the file. For us to close the file, we use the dot close method. So remember our variable again. So we say file, and then we say dot close. Then inside parentheses, so it doesn't take parameter, it doesn't take any parameter, so it's a method. Okay, so this is what we should know, everything we should know about file method. So the open method, that are the function that allow us to open a file with a file name. Then the file, when we want to write to the file, we use the dot write method. Then when we finish writing, we need to close that file. We need to use the dot close method. There you have it. This is a glimpse into some of the most common methods in Python. Understanding these techniques help you to level up your coding game. If you find this video helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe for more Python content, and hit that notification bell to see and to stay updated. Also, feel free to leave a comment sharing your favorite Python method and any you might have. Until next time, happy coding.